We are now on the final turf to complete Masechet Shekalim B'Ezer Hashem, and we're here on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph, and we're up to Shekalim Ubikurim. So if you count up from the bottom of the Amud Chaf Beis, you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines up from the bottom. The Mishnah says that if a person designated coins as shkalim or fruit as bikurim, and there's no Beis Hamikdash, then according to the Tanakama, it's hegdesh. What he did is valid. According to Rabbi Shimon, the dissenting view, only in the case of bikurim does Rabbi Shimon argue and disagree and say that to designate something as bikurim in our time is meaningless, and the Gemara analyzes hashkalim kadshu. By inference or implication, Rabbi Shimon is implying that if he would designate money and say harei zu l'shkali, then it would be valid. And the Gemara is going to have to figure out why Rabbi Shimon is making a distinction between bikurim and shkalim. But first, what we explained until now is the view of the Tanav Mishnah, the dissenting view of Rabbi Shimon. But now we have a different formulation, a different tradition as to what Rabbi Shimon was maintaining. And this is the tradition of Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. He says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon, that bein elu lo kadshu. That even in the case of shkalim, if he designated monies as shkalim, it would not become hegdesh. Bizman hazeh. Tani, we learned in the Brisa. Ger bizman hazeh. Now, for this we have to learn as Sugi increases Daf Tes. We learn all the halachas requirements of gerus from Matan Torah, and at Matan Torah, at the end of Mishpatim, the Torah records that they brought certain karbanos, and one of them is called a kin, meaning a pair of birds. And a ger has to bring, in order to clinch and complete his gerus, he has to bring kine tziporim. But what about Bisman Hazeh? The Gemara asks, well, today we don't have a Beis Hamikdash. Should we not accept gerim? And the Gemara derives from the pasuk Lid Doro Seichem that we accept gerim even in our generation without, in the absence of the Beis Hamikdash. But Sarach Lavi Kino Rivis Kesef. According to this Tana, the Tanakama, the Brisa that we're learning now, he has to bring a Revius Kesef, a silver dinar of Kesef, even Bisman Hazeh, and it's going to be set aside for his kino, for his pair of birds, meaning so that immediately when the Mikdash will be rebuilt in Meir V'Yameinu, he will have that completion of his gerus. He's still obligated to bring those karbanos. On Rab Shimon says, Bitla Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai v'Bnei Takol. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, no. Even though you're right on a Deraisa level, he should be separating this money. We're not going to allow it. Why? Because of Takola. Between now and the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash, this money is Kodesh, and it has a din of an Isa Me'ila. Somebody might come to use it and not realize that it is designated as Hegdesh. Ma'u mipnei Takola, Ka'adod Tani, like we saw in a Brisa, Ein Makdishim, V'lo Ma'arichin, V'lo Machribim, V'lo Magbim. Oh, take that out. Bisman Hazeh. These are three types of Hekdeshos. One is Hegdesh, one is Erchin, the other is Charamim. And we don't allow this to go on, Bisman Hazeh. We're not going to allow you to make something Hegdesh or take upon yourself a vow of Erkiolai or a Cherem. None of this is going to be allowed Bizman hazeh, because we're afraid of takol, that the monies will be hegdesh, and they might misuse the monies and violate inadvertently the Isur Me'ilah. So, for example, if one declares something as hegdesh, then we assume that it's for bedek habayis. If a person takes erchin, he says my value or the value of someone else is going to be donated. I take a pledge to donate that amount. And the Torah at the end of Sefer Vayikra, Perek Chav Zayin, gives us the age, and it depends on Zachar and Akeva. And that amount of money is again Hegdesh Lebedek Habayis. And number 3, we have a case of a Cherem, in which a person says that this object of mine is a Cherem, which now could be designated either for Bedek Habayis or for the Kohanim. There's something called Chermei Kohanim. And if he doesn't specify who will benefit from the Cherem, then according to the time of our Bryce, we assume it becomes Bedek Habayis, it's Hegdesh. Called Cherem, Kodesh, Kodoshim Ulashem. We don't have a base on Migdosh, and therefore, if these sanctified objects are around, we don't have any use for them, somebody might inadvertently violate the Isur Me'ilah. However, says the Bryce, in Higdish, Oherech, Ohechrem, he went ahead and he did so, then Haksus Tisoref, if it's a garment, then we burn it. If it's Behema, Te'oker. What does Te'oker mean? It should be uprooted. Ketzad, how do you achieve this? No El Pafaneh Adelis, we don't kill the animal because the animal is Hegdesh, but he Mesaveh Leo until it dies on its own. Because again, we're afraid to leave it around, because if we don't see to it that it dies, or in the case of a garment that it burns, we'll see what we do with monies in a second, then somebody might inadvertently violate the Isur Me'ilah. Hamos, if he dedicated monies as Hegdesh, Bizman Hazeh, there's no Migdosh, Yelchu Liyam HaMelech, he should take it to the Dead Sea. There are no ships in the Dead Sea, so we're sure that no one's going to pick it up and violate Me'ilah, but technically, you can destroy it in any way, any shape or form. Now, let's get back to the halacha of a ger. A ger designated his money for this kino, Revius Kesef, and he violated the decree, the injunction of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Avar v'higdish, min madi Omer Rab Shimon, from the language of Rab Shimon, who said, Bitla Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai mipnei atakola, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai undermined this law, this halachic doraisa chiyuv of the ger, bizman hazeh, to be mafresh kino be kesef, revius kesef. It implies that it's only because of takola that this was a takola. Hada Amra, and therefore we could conclude that over v'higdish kodsho. Although Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made this takana, he didn't undermine the hegdish. He just said it's a takola, don't do it. But to the evidence, if he went and he did it, then we recognize the status of kodesh. So now the Gemara says, you know what? I don't know if that's how you are forced to be medayik from Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda, who came from someplace called Antudaraya, Boy Kuma Rabbi Yossi, he raised the question in the presence of Rabbi Yossi. Hacha at, let's take the case, Hacha, of this kan sipar, of this pair of birds. Ata, meaning Rabbi Shimon. And now we turn to Daf Chav Beis, Amid Beis. Omar Kodsho. Here you're telling me, and we medayik it from the fact that it's only a takola, therefore it's valid b'di'evet. But hacha at Omar lo kodsho. Wait a second. Rabbi Shimon says that in the case of a shekel, if he went ahead and he was magdish a shekel, he said harei zeh l'shkoli, then lo kodsho. It's completely invalid. It's meaningless. Again, according to this girsa, this tradition of Rab Shimon, which is reported now by Reb Shimon ben Yehuda, as we had on Amud Aleph, then neither Shekalim nor Bikurim b'diavad are Hegdish. But yet, we're saying now that Rabbi Shimon holds in the case of the Kine Tziporim of the Ger, they are Hegdish b'diavad. Amalei, he says you have to understand the distinction between the two. And what is that? Amon, in the case of Shekalim, lekach ein makdishin lechatchila, we're not going to allow him to be magdishit, lefisha mitzvah lakrav mitruma chadasha, vehei chavile yeshana. If I get up today, on the 1st of Iyar, let's say tomorrow, right, and I was magdish Shekalim, those Shekalim are what are called old Shekalim, atike. Why? Because we've already passed Aleph Nisan. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. If, let's say, before Aleph Nisan, that would be a better case, I was Magdish to Shekalim, then those become Shekalim Atike once Rosh Chodesh Nisan passes, because now we need a new collection for the Shana Chadasha, the new year of Karbonis Tzibur. So what happens is, if a person would be Magdish today and there's no Beis HaMikdash, then after Aleph Nisan, it becomes Yeshana. He says, if one designates a shekel for the current year, it becomes old and ineligible for the following year's collection. And this is so, even if it does not transfer, he does not transfer the coin to the Tevin. Once he decides that it's Hegdish, he designates it. It hasn't even been given to the hands of the Gizbar yet. It becomes Atike. So if one designates a shekel today, he hopes that Amir Hashem, this year the Beis HaMikdash will be built. But if the Mikdash is not built until after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, then his shekel becomes ineligible. It cannot be used for Karbonis Tzibur because we're already past Rosh Chodesh Nisan. We have a new collection, and therefore, Chachamenu, our sages, decreed that it's not concentrated at all. We don't want to get into a situation of Hegdesh that cannot be used for anything and will ultimately have to be thrown and destroyed in the Yam HaMelech. But Hacha, my Islay Lamema. But in the case of the Kinim of the Gerim, what are you worried about? There's no such thing as Chadash and Yeshana. Ha Yeshana hi? L'gabe Ekdeshus Acher v'Kino shel Ger Eino Tzar Chadasha. There's no difference with regard to the birds that the Ger has to bring to clinch to complete his Gerus, whether they're old or new, so that we can wait until the Mikdash will be rebuilt, and he'll take these very same birds that he designated, he'll bring them as his carbon to complete his Gerus. Therefore, Vim Higdish Kadosh. So if he designated money for this pair of birds, that money is Hegdish. So just to summarize, the Gemara is making a fundamental distinction between Shekalim and being Magdish for the Kinei Tziporim of a Ger. In the first case, if we assume that the Mikdash will be rebuilt after Aleph Nisan, then there's nothing to do with this money. We're just going to have to destroy it, and you're bringing Hegdish into a state of destruction. Therefore, we're going to revoke his Hegdish from the get-go. But in the case of Kinei Ger, what difference does it make? Whenever the Mikdash is built, that's when he'll bring his Kinim as part of his Gerus. The Gemara is not happy. If he designates a shekel, why can't we leave it around until the Mikdash is built? An old shekel is ineligible for the standard collection of shekalim on an annual basis when the Mikdash stands on the 1st of Nisan. So it becomes ineligible with the 1st of Nisan. Now, let's say the Beis Hamikdash would be built on any other day of the year. The shekel that this person designated will be fully acceptable for the purpose of Karbanos Tzibur. So the Gemara therefore asks the question, since the Migdash will probably be built on any date other than the 1st of Nisan, let him leave his shekel until that time, and then it'll be fit for submission to the temple treasury, meaning it will not become atike when the Migdash is built. On that very day that the Migdash is built, we will send out a clarion call for people to bring in their shekalim so that we could buy and purchase the Karbanos Tzibur. He'll bring in shekel that he had designated. So the Gemara answers, Shemi Yibana Abayis Kivarishona. Just like the Mishkan was erected on the 1st of Nisan, maybe perhaps the Beis Hamikdash would be built, and the third Mikdash will be erected on the 1st of Nisan. V'hatreim trumas halishka min achadosha bisman of Yechad ben Nisan. And now they're going to call out for a new collection on the very day the Mikdash is built, in its proper time. And now the shekel becomes old; it becomes ineligible. But hacha mai islay lemema. But again, with regard to the birds of the ger, there's no difference and there's no issue whatsoever. Rav Hamnuna for Rav Ada bar Rava b'shem Rav, they said that halacha ki Rabbi Shimon, we paskin like Rabbi Shimon, and that means that if he was magdish bikurim when the Migdash is destroyed, zman hazeh, the bikurim are not chal, we completely revoke that hegdesh. But as far as shkolim are concerned, then if he was magdish shkolim, then even though he shouldn't have done so, we're worried about takala, but b'di'evid, we recognize the shkolim. Adjan alecha kol harokim, uslikole Masechet Shekalim. I can't make a siyum because during Pesach, I missed basically about 5 or 6 days of Shekalim, which I have to make up. Don't ask me when. Zman shel hayom v'lo layla. But B'li Neder, tomorrow in any event will begin Masechet Yoma, the Ezer Hashem. Thank you so much.